Conventional wisdom used to say that investing according with your values came at a cost and loss of investment return. On today's episode of Friends Talk Financial Planning, find out why that's not necessarily true. Hi, I'm John Shear, and I run a fee-only financial planning practice in Middleton, Wisconsin.
And I'm Bridget Sullivan Mermel, and I have a fee-only financial planning practice in Chicago, Illinois. But before we start, John, I just want to remind people to subscribe. That helps us with Google, and we're trying to get more subscribers so that we can get our word out more effectively.
That's great. Hit that subscribe button. And then I want to jump right into things today, Bridget, that, that conventional wisdom. And I've all long thought, or it had been in the past when I've been started in business, that, you can invest in a socially responsible or according to values, but then it comes at a cost, right? You give up some returns. And so I never really did much of that for clients, if any. And I know that the landscape has changed and things are different these days. And you've done a ton of work on that. Just give me some background, if you would, and for our viewers on why that's not necessarily the case anymore and how you look at it.
Great. So back in the day when socially responsible or ESG first started, companies started eliminating whole industries and said, okay, we're going to exclude everybody that we don't like, and we'll just include in our investments the things that we do like. I
don't like tobacco stocks, so let's keep tobacco. Anybody that does tobacco is not in the portfolio, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so then when they started doing studies about socially responsible investing, or what's now also known as ESG, or environmental, social, and governance factors, they said, oh, there's less returns. And that conclusion has stuck with the industry a lot. However, when they dug beneath the hood, or they looked under the hood of the studies, they said, you know what is the problem here is that when we exclude entire industries, we miss the hot industries. So the returns suffer. So what happened, for instance, in the gambling industry, I don't know if you remember this, John, but back in the day, gambling was bad. And a lot of people said, I don't want any gambling stocks. Then gambling, the social mores have changed over the years, and gambling is now a good source of income for a lot of states. And they said, okay,
that's right.
All right. And so then there were a lot of private companies that were involved in making the transition I have a funny story. My uncle worked for a coin counter, and he ended up delaying his retirement because he was selling so many coin counting machines at this point, right? So that's a good example of like the ripple effect. You wouldn't necessarily think coin counting machines would boom, and that would affect the economy, but all those things really boomed. And so then the socially responsible funds that just eliminated that missed out on that action. Okay. So then some mutual funds started taking a different approach, and they said, okay, instead of just eliminating entire industries, let's not be so idealistic and purist, and let's just compare companies in different industries and take the best. Okay. And so those are called excluders, were the ones that said no gambling, and includers were the ones that said we'll take the best. So for instance, right now, a lot of people don't want to invest at all in fossil fuels, no matter. And so some funds will say, okay, no oil. But then some other funds will say, we're going to compare the companies. And if they've got enough windmills and enough, battery, if they're working on enough other stuff, we'll be okay. We'll take it. And they look at both fossil fuels, but then also, the utility industry comes into play too. So the mutual funds that don't eliminate entire industries do better. Perform better.
And it's sort of like, if I'm hearing that right, it's saying of taking a more pragmatic approach. Like ideally we don't have any, but the reality is, listen, we're sacrificing so much that let's do better. right? Let's eliminate the worst offenders, if you will, if you think of it in those terms, and say, listen, we need to have some exposure to energy in that example, but what's the best one we can do, right? Not perfect, but better than just the blanket approach. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
the second big factor is the expenses. So when you run a fund, and this is true if it's socially responsible or ESG
Right.
or not, if you run a fund and you've got to actively manage or have a whole group of people get together and powwow about what investments you're going to make and evaluate all the different companies in the world, that's expensive. Versus if you've got a system where you have computers run the thing, that makes it cheaper. Okay. And
Yeah.
so then you get higher returns. Now, what's happened is a lot of people have done the work to make index funds possible for socially responsible investing, particularly in the environmental and governance areas. So the social part of it is coming along, but it's a little slower. Okay. So that means that they can get reporting from companies and just have big data feeds, just like they do with their financial information. And so they have a big data feed instead of having people go out to each individual company and trying to scout it out and pick.
Sure.
So that has been another major development in the industry. And again, developing those standards is difficult, takes a lot of time, takes a lot of conscious effort, and has happened over the last 10 to 15 years. So that now that's one of the reasons why we have such a good, we've been able to have passive investing or index funds, or basically index funds in the socially responsible and ESG space.
So as I'm here, if we sort of sum things up, the different, back in the old days, it was, golly, you give up a lot of returns. Today, that's not necessarily the case. And if I heard it right, Bridget, it's for two reasons. One, that you just explained, just like the rest of our investments, expenses matter. And now it's possible to have lower expenses with those funds that invest according to a person's values. And then the other thing is taking that more practical approach instead of the absolute, we're not going to have any of these sort of stocks in this given category. It's, listen, we need to have some from a practical standpoint to have a good return, but let's have the best of those and eliminate the worst of those, or that graded approach to things. And so as I heard that those two things make it now where instead of, oh, geez, that's a pretty tough way to invest, it's, no, this is something that people should be considering at least as part of their portfolios.
Absolutely. So I'm really happy to be talking about this. I'd love to hear people's questions on our YouTube channel. If you've got them, please either forward them to me or go ahead and put them on our YouTube channel, and the responses, I'd love to hear it. So with
That's
that
great.
wrap it up, I want to mention my name again, Bridget Sullivan Mermel. I've got a family financial planning practice in Chicago, Illinois. And I want to say that John and I are both members of ACP, or the Alliance of Comprehensive Planners. If you like the way that John and I talk and think about these financial planning topics, and you're looking for an advisor in your area, you can check out acplanners.org.
That's right. Thanks so much for sharing, Bridget. Till next time.